see. My name is Lynn Bonnet. I'm president of the Green Fund, and we're so happy to see you here today. I'm looking forward to a great event. My job is to introduce the board members that are here, and also tell you about the bathrooms are out this door all the way to the end and up slightly a short set of stairs to get to the bathrooms. And Robert, is there anything else I should say?
No.
Okay. So
yes, phones and things like that. You know, someone can put their phones on vibrate.
okay. So Marion is recommending that you put your phones on vibrate. We are having a gentleman from the Baobab Studios videotape us today for this session to be put up on our website, so future people could access the information in a friendly way. So I think that if you could silence your phone, that would be much appreciated. So my job is to introduce the board. So first, and not in the order of any importance or seniority or whatever, is Dr. Evans, Marion Evans. Who
Good morning.
An MD and a Master's in Public Health. She was formerly the health director for Bridgeport. And she is on the Grants Committee, Marketing and Outreach, and the Nominated Committee. She's currently a professor at Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven, Hamden area. She likes to scuba dive, and she's also a very good singer, just for some information. She teaches in the School of Public Health. The next person is Robin Carmen, who joined our board in 2017 as treasurer. He's currently on the Finance Committee and is chairing our Grants Committee as of this past year, 2019. He's an outdoor enthusiast. He likes to travel. He likes classical music. Is also in the process of changing careers. So that's about him. Robert Scheinman is currently in the back. Robert has joined our board in 2018. He's the CEO of this facility, Whitney Grove Cultural Commons. He's passionate about sustainability, equity, and creating an inclusive space. He is helping us with marketing outreach and technology and is my main support for moving us forward in the technological aspects of what we're trying to do. Robert Happenstedt is also in the back, and Robert joined us in 2019. He is a graduate in literature, but spent his career working in banking. But he loves auditing courses at Southern Connecticut State University as long as he doesn't have to do any papers. So I think you're auditing 4 courses now, is that right?
Yeah. No papers.
Yeah. Annie Adams is also here. She's in the back. She joined us in 2019. She oversaw millions of dollars worth of funds that the Rockefeller philanthropy advisors gave out to the Gulf community after Storm Katrina. And the focus was on supporting progressive movement building in the Gulf Coast region. And her knowledge and experience in this type of granting is a huge asset to our board and helping us as we continue to grow and move forward. Obviously, the size of our grant pool is not millions of dollars, it's more in the range of $50,000 a year. So we may share the mission and vision, but in terms of what we're able to do, it's not on the scale of Rockefeller. Aaron Good is also in the back, joined us in 2012. He's on marketing outreach. He's passionate about politics. He loves books, especially rare ones, and he loves jazz music. He's quite an accomplished jazz pianist. He helps with fundraising and is able to make connections across large numbers of groups in our community. He's an effective local leader in environmental justice issues such as English Station and urban development. And lastly, I think I'm the last board member. We have 12 board members. My name is Lynn Barnett. I've been with this board in concept since 2004 when New Haven Environmental Justice Network negotiated with the city of New Haven to create an environmental fund when the city was in the process of selling its wastewater treatment plant to the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority. It was a quasi-regional group, so it's no longer owned by the city. And in recognition that New Haven bears a disproportionate burden for treating the sewage from the communities that surround it, the communities agreed to establish this $1 million endowment. The Green Fund fits the criteria for the environmental fund that they call for in the asset purchase agreement. So my background really came out of environmental justice. My education was biology and physical therapy. I'm retired. I worked for years as a physical therapist with the goal of helping people get functional and enjoy the outdoors and sports and be as fully physically able to engage with the outdoors as possible. I also like music. I play cello with Hammond Symphony, and I can't think of anything else. I'm really grateful to our board. You know, obviously, I don't have an educational background in nonprofits or how to run an organization, and without my board experience, I'd be at the creek without a paddle. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our grants chair, Robin. Is he the next one on the agenda? At the end, we have a survey that we'd like you to fill out, which help us plan for future events. And what else did I keep this on? I also have some scratch paper if you need something to write on. And we'll be happy to answer your questions at the end. But, you know, if you see us milling around, please help yourself to the refreshments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of the grant making process overview before Marion gets into the details of the application, and then hopefully we'll have a lot of time for Q&A at the end. So there's two kind of grant cycles that the Green Fund does. One is our micro grants, which are up to $1,000, which we award on a rolling basis throughout the year. Those applications are much less involved. It's one page and a budget. But today, we're going to mainly be focused on our small and major grants, which are anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000. And this year, we're trying something a little bit different. We're using Airtable for the first time. And because it's our first year using it, and we're not all familiar with it, we're asking that you fill out the paper application, as we've always asked in previous years, and then copy and paste those answers into Airtable. So hopefully in the future, we'll get it smoothed out, but bear with this trial run. So the deadline for the grant applications this year is January 24th at 5 p.m. It's a little over 2 weeks, or a little less than 2 weeks from now. So hopefully this information session will help you with any questions you have on the process, or get started if you haven't gotten started already. So if you want to go to the website, we can show you how to get to the application. I don't know the URL for our website. I always just Google Green Fund, and it's the first non-advertisement link that comes up. It's gnhgreenfund.org. So on our homepage, you can see like some of the work we funded in the past. But to get to the application, you'll go to grants, and then we're going to be talking about small and large grants today. There, you'll see there's two documents here, the actual grant application and then the budget worksheet that you need to fill out and attach to the Airtable application. So if you click on the 2020 RFA Green Fund doc, this will take you to the application with instructions on how to fill it out, and then the link to the Airtable for online submissions on there as well. So we'll ask that you fill out this paper application, copy and paste the answers into Airtable, and then you'll be able to attach this paper application to the Airtable application, just as a fail-safe in case anything goes wrong with the Airtable submission. And with that, Marion, if you want to take it to the Airtable.
You want to go to Airtable?
Yeah. And then we can go through some of the
So before we click on Airtable, let me just make sure that everybody understands. So when you click on this is the link for the application. If you scroll down, it's about 5 pages, I counted last night. If you scroll down, there's a lot of stuff to read, and just to make sure, one of the important things that you should have, whether you're filling out your paper or your Airtable, is you should understand these issue areas of interest that we'll come back to, kind of thing. But, so probably would be nice to like print it out and have it in front of you, because if you scroll down, the application doesn't actually start to like page 4 or 5 here. And this is the application, okay? Okay, so now we'll go up and just show you Airtable. Lynn did a great job at introducing us, and as she said, we are filming. So I brought some helpers just in case also. I also have some of my former students. So Rose, would you just stand for a minute? Rose actually was in my class the year that we actually took a look at some of the things that helped us get here today. Some of the things that I started challenging about the way we do things, especially you'll see the whole reason why I'm up here is because of some of the things in our class as we were going through looking at the Green Front's website, and I use that in my classroom, in my environmental health classroom as a piece. And so Rose is intimate with some of the work that we've done, although she just got introduced to some of the challenges. So I don't really like using that word mentor all the time. You know, it's like it has a burden of responsibility sometimes, that word mentor. But I know that I'm a mentor to many of my students, and so Rose is one of those. And then I have another student that I didn't know was here today, who started her own nonprofit, and she's here to learn about our grant process. So that just sort of makes me proud as a professor, knowing that I'm on the right track, right? So Robert's going to help us look at, this is what you'll see as far as when we talk about Airtable and the grants. And so some of it is pretty, standard. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time. But I want you to know that this is really how I teach in my class. And so please ask questions. Don't leave all of your questions. There is no question too embarrassing or whatever. So as it's fresh in your mind, if a question comes up, please stop us. Like this is, if I was a classroom, I'd like move my chairs, I want to get close to you and things like that, right? So please stop us and just ask the questions that you might have about anything that's on the application. This is a work in progress. It's a work in progress for us to even get to this point today. So just know that there are some kinks, and every time we go through it, we find more kinks. And so you even asking a question may help us discover a few more things that we thought were, sort of understandable that may not be understandable to everybody out in the community. And my heart is really in the community, and so I want to make sure that people can understand our application in the community. So you have your name. If you have a name for your project or you haven't quite thought up of a name for a project, we're going to ask you in the application to give us a name for your project. So here in this line here we have getting access to Lake Whitney. Okay, so we put some things into this application just to sort of make sure that we can move on. Name of the organization, Whitneyville Cultural Commons, where we are now. And then this is to help you think about, like, if you don't have a mission and vision for the work that you do, or if you're a part of an organization, we like for you to put in a mission of your organization, and maybe around the project that you're applying for, put in the goals of your organization, or maybe a goal for the project that you're specifically going to be talking about. So Robert, and I love him so, is putting some things into this box. And many of these boxes, what you'll see is that there is a word limit, right? And so the word limit was put there specifically so that you could be concise and clear, okay? So mission would be to preserve and enhance places of communal and historic value by providing public spaces, tools, and knowledge as shared resources to supporting thriving communities, social, cultural, and economically. That must be the mission for Whitneyville Cultural Commons, right? We are a small community group that has come together, so this would be like a goal. We are a small community group that has come together to enhance our neighborhood and move it towards sustainability. So WCC is our 501c3 fiscal sponsor, and we'll come back to that, what those words mean, what those numbers mean. Basically, it means that the Whitneyville Cultural Commons is a nonprofit, okay? And that is the tax status that the United States gives it, 501c3. Organization website, you would put in a website if you have a website. If you don't have a website, because maybe you're a grassroots organization, you know, I met a woman right there, right, in the pink, she's got that color on that I love, right? And she's doing some work in hunger, right? And I know I have some other groups, like I don't know if anybody from Mothers for Justice is here today, but Mothers for Justice, all right? Small grassroots community, you may not have that tax status yet, right? Or you may not have a website kind of thing. So you would put in a website with your website here. Who's the leader of the organization? So your executive director or a leader, right? So most groups have a leader, you know, the person that most people go to. You would put that name in. If you have an email, you would put the organization's email. And most of the kind of communication that we do at the Grassroots Front is through email, and then we would send you, we do some mailings, but the quickest way is for us to email you if we have a question. So email is important. And if you don't have an organization email, then who your leader's email is would be appropriate. Now, here it says the number of board members of your organization. So maybe you don't have a board, right? Maybe you're not at that level. You would put the number of volunteers, the number of people that work to do the work that you do, right? Organization telephone number, so if we couldn't contact you by email, then how could we leave a message somewhere where we could leave a message through telephone? And then the next thing we'd like to know is last year's budget. So maybe you're an organization and you don't have a budget, you've never done a budget, and you don't know anything about a budget, right? What we also want to know is how much money did you spend last year? Did you spend $100, $500, $50? Some organizations know well what this means. But what we want to know is, doing the work that you do, how much money last year did it actually take you to do the money? It's not the money that you wish you had. It's just we want to ideal. This helps us measure how big an organization or tells us something about the work that you do. And it also tells us something about the needs that you have, right? Now here, the average number of hours per week currently worked by paid staff members. So maybe you don't have any paid staff members. Maybe it's all volunteer. Maybe it's just you and 2 other people doing the work, right? Kind of thing. So you wouldn't put anything into that box, but if your organization does have paid members, we want to know. If you have active core volunteers, we want to know how many volunteers you have. So it may be also that some of the work that you do, you have volunteers, people come together and you get a specific project done, but then people wax and wane, right, because of life or whatever. So steady, you might have a solid core of 10 members. I used to be the head of a health ministry, and my church had a 501c3. And I can tell you that I had 5 solid core volunteers that we did the bulk of the work, but when we needed to do an event, we might get 20 people that came together, right, to just get this event done, right, kind of thing, right? But then they would go off, and we had 5 real solid core volunteers kind of thing. What year did your organization start? Your organization's fiscal year. So many people don't understand, but the first thing is what we call a calendar year. January through December, right? We just started a new year, right? So that would be a calendar year. And so if you work off of a calendar year, you would check that box, and then July through June 30th is what a different calendar year, more so a fiscal or money financial sort of year for some organizations. And if your organization works on that, we would want you to check that off. That makes a difference with how we give out our money and when you need it, right? Kind of thing. And when it appears on your books. Email and contact for this application. So maybe there's a head person, but maybe there's just you and your couple of volunteers kind of thing. And so who is the person that will be responsible for the project that you want this particular funding for? That phone number, and then the category of grant that you are applying for. So our small grants, as Rafa mentioned, are from $3,000 to $5,000. That is what we call our small category. And then the next category is what we call a large grant or major grant, and that's from $3,000 to $10,000. What is the amount that you need? So maybe the amount that you need is $2,500. That would be, when we look at it, that would be in the small grant category. And I know there's always a lot of questions, so let me just stop for a minute. Let's just take a pause. So I know when I'm writing a grant, and it comes to putting down the amount of money that I need, right? I was trained to say, always ask for more than you need, right? Just ask for a little bit more, because sometimes there's unintended or unexpected things that come up, right? So don't ask for exorbitant amount, like double, but ask for a little bit more than you need kind of thing, right? And then there's a question that usually comes up when people are writing grants. What kind of questions come up when you're writing grants when we get to that? How much do you need? How much do you need to be asking for?
I'm gonna ask for it all.
Oh, okay, all right.
All of it.
All right, so if we go up to 10,000, you're gonna ask for 10,000.
I'm gonna ask for 15.
Okay. So I love it, right? I love it, and we wish we had it to give you. But you just need to know that in some places, if you ask for an amount and that's not they wouldn't even look at the rest of your application, because they might say, right, we can't fund it, right? And so then you wouldn't even get read. So, but I want to stay here with you because this is important, I think. You want to ask for, you're saying you want to ask for the top tier kind of thing.
Right, because
Right?
I'm starting a women's shelter.
Okay.
So I need it all.
You
'Cause I'm
need it
starting
all,
at the
right?
bottom.
Okay, all right. So sometimes we don't have enough money to give you to supply for all your needs. But if you had to think about something that you do, there are pieces to what you do in order to have a shelter running. Could $10,000 do a piece of that? And maybe there's two other things you need, but we just don't have the money for that. But if you had a good solid $10,000, and I know about starting women's shelters a little bit, that may buy beds for every room that you want to supply for that shelter and stuff like that, right? Okay, so you could just do that piece and write about that piece and why you need it, kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
You understand? And maybe there's two other pieces you still need, but you can make sure that you get that piece. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Anybody? Right? Thank you for speaking up like that. Yes.
I'm guessing
Laura.
you'll get into the details, but could you just speak to if there are things that are not permissible in the budget? Will you get to that?
Right. So in our, and Rafa, you can help too. So we don't with some of our grants, depending on what category and what you're looking for, we know that we will help some groups. You need to know, because this is a little bit different from some other organizations. We will even help with like startups, right? Like an organization that's starting up and they just need like capital for resources and things like that. You'll see that in some of the writings of our paper, where a lot of other organizations won't do that. Or advocacy work, right? Because there's a fine line between advocacy and what's that word? Lobbying, yes. Advocacy and lobbying, right? right? But advocacy is real work, right? Like community organizing and advocacy, right? And a lot of people don't fund those things, but we do.
Okay.
Can you think offhand, anybody, grant people what we wouldn't fund?
What about purchasing property?
Oh, real estate, no, we wouldn't do that.
But
Yeah.
staff time is permissible.
Yes, yes, personnel, absolutely. Yeah, good questions, good questions. All right. Anything else burning for anybody before we move on? Okay. Type of organization, so if you have your 501c3's nonprofit status versus if you're a community-based grassroots organization. And so I've already said I have a particular bias. I'll put it out there for grassroots organizations, but we like the other larger organizations too. So once I say that, I know I have to put my bias in check when I'm looking at grants and things like that. If you selected, now this question goes to something that we've already saw that we have a problem with that we'll fix. If you selected community-based grassroots, you need to fill out the next 5 questions. And they're really just basic questions. So if you're a community-based grassroots organization and you're not a 501c3, we don't give money to individuals, right? So you would need to go, so I would need to go to somebody like Robert, who Whitneyville is a 501c3, and say, Robert, I want to write a grant, and can they send a check to you in order for you to give the check to me, or let me do the work that I need to do? And Robert would say yes, because that's the kind of person Robert is, right? But you also need to know that Robert may say, but because I have to pay my tax accountant and people and stuff like that, I'm going to charge you a small fee if I do that for you, kind of thing. And that's fairly acceptable, kind of thing, all right? So what we're asking is, you'll need these next 5 questions to put in the information about what 501c3 you are partnering with in order for them to accept your money, because we just can't give it to you, right? You know what happens, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like I got a bank account that
Right.
will pay for that check. Yes, so,
Marion?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Can you
no.
talk about what's a reasonable fee for a fiduciary agent to be expecting from, because I think some people get,
yeah,
they just haven't done it before, they don't know.
yeah. Robert, can you?
A percentage of the grant
Yeah.
or?
I'm gonna let Robert take that one because he does it.
So the Whitneyville Cultural Commons asks for between 5 and 15%, depending upon the size and the amount of work it is. With small grants like this and with small grassroots organizations, we'd be looking for either a flat fee or 5%. We want to keep it as low as possible, but we'd also be asking you to condense all of the work that we're going to be required to do into as few steps as possible and to take as much of it onto yourself as possible. So essentially, at the end, we're just writing one check to you to cover the cost of everything that you did. So say it was to deal with like trying to open up the Lake Whitney and get a trail in there, and you're talking to RWA and you're convening meetings, we might ask you to pay for it out of pocket, and then we'll reimburse all expenses when you bring us all of the paperwork at the end. And so these are sort of the ways in which nonprofits will try and cut down on their work so that they can give more of the money to you. And with this size of grant, you really never want to have a fiscal sponsor that's taking 10% or more. You want to keep it as low as possible simply because it's community money and you really want to support the community.
So if you hear what Robert's saying, so I hear something else when he says that. You want to be able to negotiate a flat fee, right? Because that would probably be best for really small organizations, right? And depending, right, if it's a first-time relationship, right, you want to negotiate for a flat fee, but then know that if you stay in a relationship, right, that things may work out, well, or as you work towards wherever your organization or whatever your thing wants to go. So I hear flat fee. Question in the back.
Yes, this goes back 1 or 2 questions.
Yeah.
As far as examples. So if one is applying for the grant, yet what they're trying to achieve is a detailed step-by-step process, as most things are. But let's say it's reaching out to other nonprofits to see if they're willing to collaborate. Basically, like the operating budget of
Yeah.
that research to
Okay.
build something greater.
Mm-hmm.
Where
is and correct me if I'm wrong, organization like in the planning stages of that, kind of getting your feet off the ground, making those partnerships and relationships, and looking for where the money is.
Definitely making
maybe?
those partnerships and
Okay.
relationships.
Okay.
Maybe not just getting off the ground, because
Okay.
depending on, the goal or the scope, you'd be reaching out to different people.
Right.
But see who's interested in, for the operational budget, to see who's interested in a project that that organization has developed. So, the legwork in a sense.
Okay.
You're saying that's fundable?
I'm asking in this one.
Oh,
Don't
Like
think we
research and
generally
development.
fund the pre-work, I think that's what he's at. It's the stuff before the application, like all the preparation and reaching out and seeing if the project is even possible.
Yeah,
That kind of
in a sense.
I don't think we typically fund that work, we just don't have the budget to, be able to do that, so we want as much money going towards,
The actual
project.
doing, yeah, the actual
as
project.
possible.
encourage partnerships.
Yeah,
But we do encourage partnerships, so, yeah, but we don't fund that legwork kind of thing, if I'm hearing it correctly. Okay, all right, good question though, I like, yeah. Any other? Oh, yeah?
Whatever award you get, is it one lump sum or do you have it operating throughout whatever year you choose, calendar or fiscal? Do you give the money out in one chunk or do you do half and then when the project's done, do the other half?
That's a good question. So we usually give out our checks in chunks, right? So what she wants to know is if lump, like lottery, right? Lump sum, right? Or pieces. And so we usually, once we say we're gonna fund you, we will send you that check. There's usually some other contracts and things that have to be signed, but usually because we're a small organization too, we're all volunteers doing the work. We don't wanna be saddled down with having to give out multiple checks. So usually Rotham writes a check once we say that you're funded and everything that we need from you comes in, we usually write a check to you, period.
so I'll just add to that and say, yeah, so first, once we've let you know that you're publicly funded, we'll draft a contract, and then once we both sign it, we'll usually send the check for the full amount, and then we'll ask for 2 reports, one an interim report 6 months in, to kind of let us know where the project is at the time, and then a final report at the end of the year when the project is completed. And all of our grants come with the stipulation that if there's unused funds from the grant, if you're under budget, good job. We ask that you return the money, so we can give out more grants in the current projects.
But let's just say, there are organizations that have come to us at the end and they have a little bit of money left over kind of thing. And it's the same project, but they want to continue on, or they realize that although they didn't say this in the grant, that there's a piece that maybe this money could cover, and if it's okay for them to use. And we've met as a grant committee and as a board and said yes or no kind of thing. Sometimes it's right in line with your work, because it should really be about helping the organizations, right, that we're funding kind of thing. But sometimes they'll ask for stuff that it looks like it's in a different direction than what they originally wrote about, and we might say no to that, right, to send us back that money kind of thing. So, and at least in my experience being on the board, those are some of the. But yes, we've said yes to many people when it seems like it's in line with the work that they're continuing to do. One of the projects that we funded in the past that I've overseen and I'm still in contact with is Solar Youth. Solar Youth is a youth organization project, and a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, we've got $300, $500 left over, and we want to continue to." Can we use that, right? And we've said yes to them to be able, so that they don't have to send us stuff back. Okay. How is your organization connected to the affected community for this application? So, when I read that and went back over it, and this has been a couple of times now, I think that there's some stuff here that we need to. So, what do we mean by affected community for this application? So maybe you wanna do your project in a certain neighborhood. Maybe it's not all over Hampden or all over, New Haven, but it's in a particular neighborhood. So the community that you wanna work in or you're working in, we would want you to tell us what community you're working in. Is it the white community? Is it New Hawkville? Is it, so how is your organization connected to that? So we do our work, you would tell us, we do our work in New Hawkville, or we do our work in, I don't know really if Hampden has sections, but, we do our work in, a particular section of, Hampden, okay? Whitneyville, yes. Yes, all right. Which issue area best describes your project? Now, remember, this is I see you. This is the area where I said we have issue areas. So there are things that we would like to see many of our organizations working on. And these issue areas are very broad, right? We can't cover everything. But what we ask you to do is pick the most likely one that fits with the work you're doing. So the gentleman in the gray sweatshirt, you had your hand up for a question.
If we go beyond the WPCA area, would that be, even though if we're like concentrating our project in Hampden and New Haven, but maybe we extend into a little part of Cheshire, is that acceptable?
Yeah, I'm going to insert there a little bit. So we in the past have gotten some great grants from Cheshire high school students, and they're out of the area that Ron is talking about is the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority. They are the source of our endowment, and we are to serve the community of New Haven, Hampden, and Woodbridge, and East Haven, which make up the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority. There is nothing in our contract that says we can't fund outside of that region, but we have not to date. And part of it is because we just have such limited money that we've restricted it to that. As we grow, I think we're considering looking outside of that area. So, I mean, as long as the bulk of your ask is not in a community that's outside of the region,
Right.
regional water, not the regional authority, but the Water Pollution Control Authority, depending on the project, you can't commit yes or no, but if you feel like it's important and integral to what you're asking, by all means include it, but I wouldn't emphasize it. Based on our past behavior of, saying, oh, it's a great project, but sorry, it's outside of it.
Right, because we know that environmental problems don't stop at borderlines, right? Right? Or environmental work doesn't always stop at borderlines. And so just like your question when you first stated it, you do the bulk of your work in New Hampden and New Haven, but there is a small part, right, that's in Cheshire, right? I appreciate that you would tell us that, right? And we may come back to you and say, well, how much of it is there, right? We may have a question or two. But if you tell me the bulk of your work, I'll believe you that the bulk of your work is in New Haven or in Hampden. Okay? Right? Because, environmental problems don't stop at the town line. But if you told me Cheshire is where you do most of the work, then we've had, stuff where we've had to say no to kind of thing, and we're not there yet. Okay, other questions? Okay, so I don't want to leave issue areas yet. I just want to know, if you have your paper copy, I forget what page this is, but whatever, I just want to talk about the issue areas, and you can read them, but like we were talking about before, organizing, advocacy, and community engagement. You don't get a whole lot of organizations that fund this kind of stuff, right? So we fund for environmental justice issues, right? We fund for, if you want to educate people about those types of things, climate change, environmental conservation, sustainability, increased public access to natural resources. Past year, we had one of my favorite groups, Fixing Fathers. I don't know, anybody from Fixing Fathers here? Wrote a micro grant because increase in public access is they took kids to fishing, right? And when you think about how important that is for children to understand their environment through a trip like a fishing trip, right? Or to understand like fish and oceans and all the other things that you can educate around a fishing trip, right? And so we gave them a small amount of money to just take kids fishing, right? Because there's some kids that would never have access to fishing or understand that kind of thing, right? Air and water cleanup initiatives. You got a group and you want to go and clean up and have a Saturday cleanup in your neighborhood or community. Then there's community planning, advocacy activities, and innovative technology, right? And so these are some of the issue areas, but there may be a thing where you're thinking about it, what your project is doing, and it's not on this list specifically. And that may be when you contact us and say, I'm not quite sure, right? But this is what I think it is, but we want you to sort of align as closely as possible to our issue areas. What's the project's location? So that there is some overlap synergy between project location. So maybe you're located in Whitneyville, but your project is really going to be in a different place, right? So your project is going to be in a neighborhood of New Haven or something like that, because maybe you partner with somebody that really sees the need to do this work in a different place other than where your organization is located at. Does that make sense to people? Okay, all right. Okay, Edgewood Park at West Rock Interest. I love Robert. Okay. Who do you want to reach with your project? We call this question demographics, right? So it's about age, it's about, you might see questions about, sometimes on various grants about ethnicity and things like that. But we want to know sort of what are the age categories, what are some of the problems. Although we don't have everything listed here, but this is our foray into collecting some demographics in a different way. And then the next question is just another way that you can tell us. So, for example, percentages of those considered minority, or maybe you want to tell us that this particular group is bearing a burden, like those people that live close to, that end of IKEA, that end of, Long Wharf, and that neighborhood that you have to go under, the highway, right? Like I go there and I'm like, that are, bearing the burden of like air pollution or something like that. And there's something specific that you want to communicate to us about this group, or what we call target population, but this group or community that you really want to work with, or you're working with to help around whatever opportunity or challenge. Okay. Everyone within a mile radius around Lake Whitney. Okay. It's a diverse community ranging from a lower income neighborhood on the southwest of the Lake Whitney. Okay. To a very wealthy neighborhood. So it ranges from low income to, so it has a diverse income, socioeconomic status. Okay. In your own words, what conditions in your target audience's environment do you want to address with this problem? So you see here is what we talked about. 50-word limit. So imagine you were in that elevator and you had to give a speech to somebody to tell them about what you wanted to do and why it was important and what you wanted to address with your project. And you were going from the first floor to maybe the fourth floor or fifth floor of a medium speed elevator, right? Okay? So 50-word limit. How would you start up a conversation and said, I'm going to pick up my check for, this project, and how would you explain that project? We want you to really take some time and be clear and concise about what it is that you're doing, what you think you're addressing. And then the next question says, what do you plan to do? You'd be surprised some of the things we have to read from a grant perspective, right? And maybe the last two sentences of half a page really tells us, right, what you plan to do. So, provide an outline of your project expected to be completed in 1 year. So our grant cycle goes for 1 year. We give you about a year to finish your project. And we understand, that's why we asked the previous question about what your year cycle is, what you plan to do. So when we say outline, you know, if this was my classroom, I say start with a bullet, all right? Start with a bullet. You know, the easiest way to do this is start with a bullet about what you plan to do and what your steps are. And then add sentences to those bullets, right? Does that make sense? To help you sort of, if you thought about what you plan to do and it took 10 steps, right? You could do 10 bullets. And then what those 10 sentences or 2 sentences for each bullet would look like, kind of thing, right? And I'm just, it doesn't have to be, but I'm just sort of giving you an idea of what we're thinking about. So Robert, with his wonderful mind, it says, get local residents to sign a petition to Regional Water Authority showing the need to remove the fence. Yeah, I knew what it was, right? Solicit Regional Water Authority with that petition. So the first step is get people to sign up to do a petition, right? So there's actually a step before that one. Do a petition, get people to sign the petition, then bring the petition before the Regional Water Authority in whatever time frame that they look at those types of things, right? Understanding that calendar and things like that. And then you have to wait, right, and then fund the removing fence and allowing people access. So maybe the Regional Water Authority comes back to you because of your petition and says, yes, we'll allow the fence to be removed, but we don't have the money to remove the fence. Right? You know, right? And so, so then that's going to add another step, right? Like, then you're saying, do I have enough, can I get community partners to move, to work with me in order to help us move the fence? And what are those things around there? Do we have to get permits to move the fence, right? Kind of thing. There might be a couple of other steps, right, in there that.
So would you, about your
God bless you.
collaborators, like people who are collaborating with you on the project, like, for instance, like we do in the New Haven Parks, would you mention New Haven Parks and Recreation collaboration?
Right, because your partners, in order to work with you, may have some steps to do. Like, I'm thinking about at the university, a lot of times we do work with community organizations, or we send our students to do internships, and there's like MOUs that have to be signed. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, you know, and things like that, that in order to work with you, they have to do something special too, even though they love the partnership kind of thing. So yes, you have to think about all of those things, right? Absolutely. What specific tactics and strategies will you use, right? So some of that we already talked about when we're thinking about those bullets, right? But what's a tactic? I'm sorry, tell me your name. Lisa, okay. So Lisa, give me an example of like a specific thing that you have to do in order to work with the parks, or to the parks to work with you, or one of your partners to work with you.
We have to get permits in order to have our.
Get permits, right? So you need somebody that would be in your list of to-dos or bullets or whatever, but you know that that's gonna come, and there might be like a time frame, right? Because if it's like anything, I used to work in the city, right? It's a process, right? So like I say, it's a process, right? So you have to allow that in your plan, or what we call your timeline, right? Kind of thing. Yes. So specific tactics and strategies you would use would be, right, know the things about, there are some rules around petitions too, or whatever it is that you use. Protest might be another. The news, the media, social media might be also specific tactics that people use. And permits, like Lisa said, might be one of those other, making sure the permits are signed and you get the proper whatever it is that you need to do, the work that you're going to do. Does that make sense to people? Am I making sense? Questions for me? Okay, yes? All right. What are your objectives? So objectives here we're using as results, right? So if I talked, if Robert with this example that we're using, what are your objectives for doing this project? So really it's what results do you want to accomplish by the end of this project in 1 year? So one of the results, and we're talking about this fence around this lake, right, in this petition, we want the fence down. That's the ultimate result, right? We want the fence down, and then the other ultimate might be to have people, provide people access, right? You take down the fence so that people can have better access to this lake, right? Or right? Okay. So get 1,000 people might be the result. We got 1,000 people, or we got 1,200 people to sign the petition, right? You went above and beyond. Get at least 10 organizations to sign the petition. And there is some thinking, specific thinking around when you talk about your results, or what we also call outcomes, right? Objectives, results, outcomes kind of thing. You have like your ultimate, out of the park kind of goal, but sometimes we say go for, instead of 10 or like if 10 organizations would be your out of the park, maybe you might say 5, and then if you get 10, you've done really good, kind of thing, right? Get RWA to agree to open the property, so there's a couple of things that you can put here as your results. So results don't have to be one thing, right? Because the project, right, is multidimensional. So if you think about all the sort of positive outcomes, successes, right, results that can happen with your project, you might list a couple of them. Because in your report, we also want you to tell you, and then we didn't realize, sometimes there's things that happen that you don't even foresee in your application that are really good results or outcomes, right? Okay. And then this is why I'm standing here today, this next question. Why I'm standing here today. Right, Rose? This is why I'm standing here today, because of this question. It says, how will you measure the results of your project? And it says some examples of measurement tools are available on our website, and there's a 100-word limit. So, in some organizations, they've got this down pat. I will also say that things like the organization that I worked with this past year, Solar Youth, they do a great job with giving you different ways that they measure their results and outcomes. So I'll put this out to the crowd. What's the quickest way that you can come up with how you explain your measuring results? I know you want to talk to me. Go ahead. Tell me your name.
A survey?
A survey, right? But right, a survey might be one of the easiest ways that you measure your results, right? You use a survey. We're going to do that today, actually. At the end of this, I'm going to give you a survey to fill out. So survey might be one. What are the other ones? In the back.
Maybe like attendance of engagement.
Right, so the number of people that came to your event, right? So maybe with you put in a grant that you want 100 people to come out to this neighborhood, whatever, right? And then you say you counted at least 150, right? Kind of thing. So those numbers, that's the quickest, easiest, and then you were gonna say
that would be, did you accomplish the goal that you originally put in?
Right, did you accomplish the goal? So I'm here because I get tired of seeing just those numbers and things like that, right? That's the quickest, easiest way. But if you tell me 100 people came, you might have counted somebody that was passing by that's really nosy kind of thing, right? You understand what I mean? So I want to know, how can you show me the impact of those 100 people? And I'm interested in seeing you do it in other ways. Because what I know is that in community grassroots people, you don't always have the people that are bean counters, right? Everybody being yeah, right? Okay. So maybe you take a photo with a lot of people, or in this room right now, if I was to take a photo, I want to stand back here because I can get a photo of most of the people. And like, if you do like I do, when I see photos like that, I say, okay, how many empty chairs is in that room? Okay, right? There's ways of taking photos that people makes it look. But like maybe you do a really good photo to not only tell us that number, but then you do a photo of the people. And in that photo, I not only see a lot of involved people that care maybe about that based upon what I see in the picture, but I might also be able to see the diversity that you're able to attract in that picture, right? I might also be able to see read a whole lot of other things into that one picture that you give me, right? So on our website, we have like a picture at the end where they're sitting down, they're doing some troop school is doing some education with kids and things like that, right? That picture to me tells 1,000 words, much more than you telling me 10 people came or 100 people came, right? Kind of thing. So I want to encourage you to tell your story, to tell your success and outcomes and results in other ways. And that is why I'm here today, okay? Because you telling me 10 people or you passed out so many brochures or whatever, or got so many volunteers, does not really tell me the story, right, about your project and the impact of your project.
So say
Okay,
mine
there we
is
go.
a woman's shelter.
Okay.
So I can go to the New Haven Green
Uh-huh.
and take a picture of the homelessness, right? And then I could show like maybe the women, like there's not so much homelessness no more because of my program. Could that be like something like that, I'm saying?
It could be, but I'm gonna stay with you here, okay? Because now you're like, I got you now, right? So what I would say is there's this concept called photo voice, right? So it's not only you taking the pictures, but maybe you'll capture what they say to you, and you'll write it in a little. So you'll take say you start your shelter, and your first 10 people that come, you really make an impact, and you're able to show, like, because we give you a year, that when that person first came, right, they're gonna tell you something, right, that convinces you that they need to be in your project or at your shelter, right? You may capture that in a couple sentences with a photo, right? And then before your project is finished, you may be able to go back to them and say, tell me how you've changed now that you've been here. That means something, right? Like you taking that person, taking a photo of them. Maybe I do this program on Saturdays with at-risk youth. And when I see the at-risk youth, middle school and high school kids come in and they're dressed in black and they're not looking at you and they're doing all that stuff. And then at the end, they're doing presentations and they're dressed differently, and that tells a lot more, right? And then give a blurb about what they say now that they've gone 9 months or 8 months or a year with you. Tells me a lot more about the impact of why not only I want to fund you again, but maybe some other people, and then you can use that to go get more money, and that's more impactful, right? You not only talk about your results and measure your results in different ways other than numbers, right? We call it qualitative, right? Where you get qualitative pieces. But does that make sense to people?
Yes.
Okay, and that is why I'm here. That is why I'm here today. And you know, like, I'll talk to you also because not only am I here, but my students need to do projects, right? They need to do these type of projects, right? And so, like, maybe you'll come back at the end of this and say, hey, Dr. Evans, you got a student that could do some of that work? My nephew, Kashan, he's around the corner, right? I was like, you're coming, you're going to help, you're going to do this, right? You're going to hear, right? So you can know, right? Kind of thing. So does that make sense how you can tell your story, capture your results, measure your outcomes outside of numbers, right? Or outside of those sort of typical ways, right? That people, and yes.
How you're trained, like I'm trained, your measurable goals always have to be numbers, and they don't really have to be numbers, it can be another way.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. and you know, we might wanna come back, it's up to you guys, but we might wanna come back and have some smaller roundtable discussions about how you do this. And this is some of the stuff that my students worked on, right, to be able to tell your story. I'm also a Graustein, you know, fellow, and so storytelling, and not only at Graustein, but now at other funders, their storytelling is really, right, you wanna capture their hearts,
Do that at,
right?
Concat.
So in Bridgeport, I know there's a particular part of Bridgeport and Black Rock, or it's still Bridgeport, that there are millionaires that live there, right? And I'm sure there's a place in New Haven too like that. But I know particularly where these people live, right? So it's one thing to go up to them and say, oh, I helped 25 women for a year, and you know, and now they're doing much better and they're able to find jobs, whatever. But it was another thing when you can say, I helped 25 women, this is what they look like, right? Because we make assumptions based on when we first see people, right? I helped 25 women, this is what they look like, this is the diversity of them, and this is what they said before and after. And that would make me want to give you $50,000 to do all three parts of that project versus you just telling me about the numbers, right? Okay. All right. Okay. So, how will this project help you reach the mission of your organization? Now, so in the beginning, we asked you to tell us about the mission and your vision and your goals kind of thing. And then this is, go back to this. Are you really sort of telling us that this project, right, fits into what you're saying you're doing? Or is it totally out of the scope? You're just asking for this money and it's totally out of the scope. So this makes you go back and say, I said that this is what my organization or this is what my group is about. And is this project really fitting in with, right? And so how will this project help you reach the mission of your organization? It's Lake Whitney has been a communal asset of the neighborhood of Whitneyville for 400 years. Removing, you know, what does the fence say to people? Keep out. Right? That's the story that I want to know. Right? That's the story. That's the real story. We want inclusion, right? We don't want the fence there. We want access, right? Who are the key project leaders for this project? I know you told us that sort of in the beginning, but maybe things will change for pieces of it. But who are the key project leaders for this project? What organizations are you collaborating with, and what is their role? So we encourage you to have partners. We won't penalize you if you don't have partners, but we know that this work, you know, no man is an island, and this kind of work around an environment is done best with partners. And so it says something about a group or organization that you have partners, people that you work with, that you don't think that you need to do your work in isolation. You had your hand up.
I just have a technical question.
Yeah.
So, like in the paper version of this, it doesn't say that there's a word limit for the key project leaders section. Does that star mean that there is a word limit, and do you know?
The star means that it's a necessary field. The word limit will be stated very carefully down here when there is a word limit.
So there's not a word limit.
Right.
For the, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. What steps? Yep. Okay. And so yeah, we just talked about that. So if you so think about this. Maybe there is 5 people that are working on this project in your organization, but maybe there's really 3 key people, because the next thing we ask you is what each role each of those people play. So you may not want to write about what role of all 5 people, but pick the 3 key ones, so it makes you think a little
Yeah,
bit.
I just cut and pasted our bios,
Yeah.
2 people,
Yeah, okay.
and I was like, oh, doesn't have a limit. Do I have to spend more time editing this before I put it into the?
Yeah, no.
Actually, on the bios, we have a thing at the end where we ask to attach
Right. You can attach it
information
at
about
a
your
list.
organization and board members and things.
Yeah.
Would
So
you
that
rather
would
us
be-
not then do that here?
Right.
Yes,
Just want-
if
you
it's
just
gonna
want
be
names
attached at the
there?
end, names and roles, yeah. So,
Yeah.
I think that would-
So if you're gonna attach it at the end, okay, but the role is really, right, accountability, right, within the organization and outside of our organization. So yes, so then the next question we ask you, what are those three people's roles, right? So, Robert's putting in some names of people there, but then, what their roles are. So maybe Robert will head the petition, cause he's that kind of, person. And, but maybe, the third person in your key role group will be the people the person that's in charge of making sure those permits get done, right? And those are those, I always say, I am the thinker up here. Like, I like to think up here. I cannot for the life of me do details and nitty gritty. I need people to help me do that, right? Like, I forget stuff. I'm not a nitty gritty person. So that person will be the person that reminds you that a permit has to be done, or the police have to be contacted, or whatever, right? And they play key roles, kind of thing. What steps have you taken to include affected community stakeholders in your decision making? And so this is new to us. We're moving there, and I'm glad we're moving there. But it says something about a group doing work when you go into a community and you don't involve the people that live there, right? And so we want you to try to make an effort to involve the community. So if you're cleaning up a certain piece of, let's say, Mill Pond in New Haven, or the Lake Whitney, and things like that, we want you that's good work to do, but we want you to figure out a way to include the people that live there, right? To include the people that live in that community. And maybe at first it'll be one or two people, right? Because they don't really understand, right? And, but we want you to start thinking about how you include the people and be more inclusive in the groups, or to make sure that we capture that we understand how you're doing your work, kind of thing. So how is leadership shared? And this also goes back to this equity piece that many people have heard about, and they don't know. Equity is really about how we distribute resources, right? And so, and we can do it, but this makes organizations now think about, are we just going in and saying, oh, we're just here to do this work, and you just stay where you are, and we're going to do this, and we've got money. We're not sharing the work or the money or the mission with you, right? Like many organizations have done, but we want to move away from that. And so this actually asks you to think about who would you need to contact in the community in order to make sure, give them an opportunity to do some of this work with you. And it helps build your organizations and your mission, I think. Ask council people, door-to-door outreach. Having food is a wonderful thing. Having, a community food event kind of thing. And I say that, and to me it seems like it's common knowledge, but common knowledge is not always common. Okay. Describe any specific challenges and opportunities your group faces in accessing resources for your work. So we also want to know, what are the challenges for you, right? So you might say to me, for your shelter project, this money will only cover the first piece, which is making sure I have beds and rooms and people are not sleeping on the floor. But there are two other pieces that I still need, that I'm looking for funding for. Because maybe I'm sitting there and I said, oh, I just met somebody that's really interested in this cause, and maybe I can reach out to you and say, hey, you should contact for your other two pieces this person, right? Because now you've told me what you need, and we can be a help. Maybe not, we can't give you another $10,000, but maybe we can put you in contact with someone that can help you continue your work, right? Does that make sense? Definitely. All right. So this can range from skills and capacity to, maybe some people say, well, I really think that I want to become a nonprofit, right? And maybe what the next step I think for my organization to do is to become a nonprofit, right? And then that may tell us, hey, if a lot of people say that, maybe the next workshop we give will be about how to become a nonprofit kind of thing, right? RWA, okay. So Robert's right, and RWA requires that all projects that are created outside of their organization be completely funded, are really expensive, so we require a large amount of money.
Show me the money.
All right. And so this was what Rafa was talking about before. This is where you can attach a file. There are 5 things that we are asking you to attach, especially since this is our first time doing Airtable as we move towards a totally electronic grant submission. So this year we're asking you to attach this written piece, the RFA that we've gone through. But we're also asking you to attach these 5 things, right? So next thing we're going to talk about, and I'll let Rafa start off. Budget for the project. We asked for a most recent audited financial statement. So this is for larger organizations. Some organizations we deal with that knows exactly what that is. But it's really sort of like what nonprofits have to do every once in a while for tax status and to keep their nonprofit status. Am I right or wrong, Robert? Audited financial statement. Everyone, every certain number of
Only if you're
years.
over $500,000
Okay.
in yearly revenue.
Okay. Last year's budget. So maybe you've never done a budget before, and we're gonna get to this. We're gonna move to this next. Maybe you've never done a budget before, but you know your expenses and you can list your expenses. Really, it's really back to that question about how much did you spend. But go ahead, Lynn, and then.
Just before we move off to this budget, is the last question about capacity. So some organizations don't have grant writers. It's a challenge for them to find a place to even meet. They don't have resources for, printing material. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we need to know about your organization and the challenges that you face, because that helps us understand, what the limits might be. And if you're developing a project that we think you don't have the capacity to run, we're not going to be likely to fund it. And if you can explain what your capacity needs are in a way that, well, maybe if we can help you meet those things, this project could really go. So that's what that question is about, really, is for those organizations that are, don't have grant writers, don't have dedicated staff, are really first-timers that are struggling to come up with a project they think is meaningful. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
And absolutely, because I'm not only on our grant committee, but I am on other grants committees, and you might hear something, wow, this was really well written, and that to me is like a red flag, because that means that maybe this organization has a grant writer, right? Somebody that's all they do all year long is write grants, versus a community organization, and you shouldn't be held to that kind of same standard. That's not equitable, right? When I'm reviewing your grant, because someone has a grant writer, and your community group getting together and trying to write this out, kind of thing, right? So we recognize that.
Grant writers or?
No. If you have a grant writer or have somebody that will write the grant for you, that's fine. I'm glad that you have that. But we have to recognize that everybody doesn't have that, and that we can't compare, say, Yale's Nature Conservatory or some other kind of organization, CFE, Connecticut Fund for the Environment, that has grant writers versus when you submit your grant, right? And we have to look at that. Yeah.
Are you looking for the fiduciary's budget if you have fiduciaries?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Are we looking for the fiduciary's budget and fiduciary's budget, if they use a fiduciary? No, it's not the fiduciary budget, it's your budget. The fiduciary are just the hands that your money goes through.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so the attachment is for the project budget.
The project budget.
Audited financial statements for the whole organization if you have it. But earlier, one of the first questions was what was last year's budget. That's for the total organization, like what you spent on everything last year. But the attachment for the budget worksheet, we really just want to know the line items for this specific project.
Yeah.
So you would have to, say I spent, $500 on permits, $2,000 on policing, you would want it all labeled, like?
If for the project, yes. For the organization total last year, no, just a number.
Okay.
But we'll get into the budget worksheet and show you what kind of what we're looking
I think
for.
I put it up. All right, so while Rathman's saying that, let me just pull up the budget worksheet, right?
Yeah, so this is the budget worksheet. So at the top, we have your funding sources, or potential funding sources. So Greater New Haven Green Fund's already in there because you're requesting funding from us. And then the next column is the status, whether you've requested this funding or committed. If it's us you're applying for, put requested there. We haven't committed to funding anything yet. And then the next column is how much money are you requesting from us, up to $10,000. And then a lot of organizations are applying for grants for multiple areas. So if you're applying for, better yet, you have funding committed from other organizations, list those in the next columns. If you have more than 4 other organizations you're getting funding from, you can add rows as needed.
If you are applying, could that also be listed? If you're applying for the funding to these other organizations,
Yes.
like you didn't actually get the money?
Yeah. So you put the name of the organization, and you'd say requested rather than committed.
Is this also in relation to like matching funds?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So then, for the amounts, the amount you're requesting from us will go in this column, just in the first row. And then for all the other organizations, whether it's requested or committed, just put the amount here. And then in the last column, you should have the total project budget at the bottom for how much funding you're requesting from all the sources. That's pretty straightforward. And then the expenses, we like to break it down between personnel and non-personnel items. So if you are going to require some staff member time on this project, you'll put like the names or the roles, one on each line, and then the calculation for how you're estimating the cost for this. So maybe you have a staff member who's going to work 100 hours on this project at $25 an hour. So you have $2,500 there. So some basic estimation, however you want to do it. And then non-personnel items, like if you're putting in a community garden, you'll need maybe equipment rental, dirt, whatever, seeds, yeah, anything else. So break it down, just be clear and concise is what we want to know. We just want to know how the money is going to be spent. And so as precisely as you can do that, is the goal.
And so sometimes like with the non-personnel, right, so just say equipment, maybe you have, like he said, a community garden, where maybe you're gonna do equipment, you put in money for equipment, but then you get like a Home Depot to like donate stuff to you, right? Those are the little things that might change your budget, but then you've got money to maybe still work on that project, but to put other places. But you don't know that when you're first putting your budget, but you know you're working on stuff like that, right? Kind of thing. I'm just saying, it's totally fine, and that's what we expect. So that's how sometimes people at the end have money, right, that they didn't use because maybe they said, in the original budget that they were going to use it for something, but then you got a donation or something like that.
So one of the things I want to point out here is we have 2 columns in the expenses, one from the New Haven Green Fund and then from other sources. So the point of this is we kind of want to know how our funding would be spent if we were to grant it to you. So if you had like several funding sources requested, but nothing committed, we'd want to know, like, if we agree to fund you, what could you accomplish with just the amount of money we're giving you? So that's why we have this column. So maybe you'd want to put in like 5 community gardens ideally, but you'll put in as many as you have the funding for. So you can say from us, like, we'll be one of the gardens, and you can break down the expenses in this column. If you're unable to do that, if you've got some funding and it's all going to be in one pool of funding and ours is just going to be covering a portion, then just split it out proportionally. questions on the budget worksheet.
So, I have a question. So can you just tell me, how do you feel about all personnel? Like, if the project and the money we're asking you for is just to pay people's salaries?
I don't have a hard line view of that. Like, I've been on both sides, so, I get, in the past, we've leaned towards funding projects that involve less personnel expenses, but, I can think of like smaller grants that really the only major expense is personnel, is like getting your people out there, advocating for the community. And I think those are really important grants to fund. So I guess the criteria to me is more, are these dollars being put towards the mission? So if the personnel is like out there doing the project, that's fine with me. If it's all like administrative expenses and some things that are like sort of in line with the project, but not really, they might be working on other stuff, then that would be a red flag for me.
Would, let's say working with young people,
Yeah.
on an environmental project, would their being paid be considered personnel, or would it be part of the mission?
We would put that in personnel. Yeah,
You would?
yeah, and I would just specify, like,
Okay.
these are the, like, young people we're planning to pay for their, hours. But then, yeah, in the actual grant application, like, you would want to talk about, like, this is part of the goal of this grant, is to,
Reallocate it all.
Right.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly, like,
And-
hey, these, to whatever community you're trying to reach and get them, teach them new skills and things.
Right.
And we've had grants in the past that involve that, of hiring, mechanics, from underserved neighborhoods and teaching them skills and then having them lead workshops and, yeah, that's great, so we put that in this as well.
yeah, he answered that. And even if you can't pay them like, you know, an hourly wage, but you're gonna give them what we call a stipend or incentive, you know, a gift card, you know, things like that. Now, gift card wouldn't be personnel, but there's like, the stipend would go under, a stipend payment would go under personnel.
Yeah, that's another reason I don't want to give a hard line answer. Like, if it's all personnel, then
Yeah.
it looks that, like, the cases like that, that's the money directly in line with the project goal and mission, so. Any other budget-related questions?
Okay, wonderful, you're on time. Okay, so,
Oh, excuse me, Marion?
Yeah.
You said there were 5 attachments to have?
oh, yes. There are 5 attachments that we list at the end of the application that we want you to do. And so the budget is one, the budget, like he said, for the project, just the budget for the project. If your organization that has an audited financial statement, if you have what you spent on that project last year, or last year's budget for the organization or your group kind of thing, is what he, Rothen said. And then a list of board members and officers or leadership for your organization or group. So everybody that works with you. And then lastly, a short bio of the key project leaders for this project. So in the beginning, if you were here when Lynn, she just sort of had a little piece of paper in her hand and she just said just a few words about each of the board members kind of thing. And then we actually want you to take, for this year at least, we want you to take the paper copy, scan it and attach it into the grant, okay?
Well, actually, it's a Word doc.
Or Word
Yeah.
doc, yes.
So you're gonna just fill out the Word doc, use word count, and,
Yeah.
and copy paste from the Word doc. And then submit that whole thing at the end so that and then you're gonna email us telling us that you submitted it. And that protects you and us from missing your application.
Finished.
Thank you.
Anybody, the grant deadline is when? 24th of January. Okay, 5 o'clock, yes. All right. Question?
So the application process is once a year?
So for large and small grants, they is once a year, we put out a call, usually November, early December when we say call, we mean RFA or request for applications, right? Usually November, December, right?
Right.
November.
We were a little late this year because we.
We were working on Airtable. I see you, 1 minute. And then we have another granting process. It's called micro grants. And so if you scroll down on our website at the end of our application process for this, you'll see something that says 2020 micro grant applications. And so those applications are for up to $1,000. And so maybe you need a little seed money kind of thing, I call it, right, for getting your feet off doing some other project. It's $1,000, and that goes along a rolling basis. The only time we don't take micro grants during a year is July and August. But every other month of the year, June, July,
August.
June, July,
Summer
August.
vacation.
The summer, okay. June, July, August are the 3 months we won't look at micro grants, but you could be working on some, right? And then you can submit those up to $1,000 requests, any of those other months. Okay, good. Okay, someone, yes, Lisa.
Do you want the application uploaded as a Word document or a PDF file?
The application is in a Word document now as it exists on the website, right? The one
Yeah,
when you open it up.
Because you want to open it and type into it, and use the word count on your computer for figuring out, and then from there, you're gonna copy paste into Airtable for each question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then.
We want you to play around with the Airtable. That's why we're making you do this second step. Okay, I'm just being truthful. Because when we go to Airtable, we iron out all the things that we didn't catch before. When we go to Airtable as the total, the only way that we're gonna accept grant applications. We've had say 50 people now use it, and we've ironed out the kinks, hopefully this year.
So in the past, people have submitted their application as a PDF. So it, depending on how you feel, it maybe makes you feel a little more secure. But after you finish the Word doc and you copy paste it, and you've got everything in order to submit, it's okay if you convert it to a PDF if you want to. It's not.
Yeah, because some people want PDFs and some people are okay with the Word, so I just want to.
Yeah, the Word doc is fine. You need the Word doc to type into it.
You have a question?
So you can apply for a micro grant and the larger grant?
So you can apply for a micro grant at any time, okay? So you can apply for a micro grant at any time, but I think your question is, can you apply for the same thing? So let me go back to this young lady here with her shelter project. And remember how we said there's pieces, right? So let's just say you want to apply for a small or large grant with this by January 24th for a main portion, but there's a small piece that you would need, because we get micro grants out pretty quickly, quicker than this once a year thing. But there's a small piece, right, separate, that maybe you didn't think about or came up unexpectedly that you could use some money for, that would be part of the project, but you didn't actually include it. It can't be the same stuff, right? That's what I'm trying to say, right? Can't be the same stuff. We can't give you money for the same thing.
But you can apply for both.
Yes.
I don't think we've ever funded a major grant and a micro grant to the same organization in the same year. But if I'd say submit or have your major grant first.
Right.
If we are unable to fund it, then you can apply for a micro grant.
Right. The other thing is, I think what we say, you guys correct me, because I'm not the expert. The other thing we say is that we won't fund you if you've got money from us and didn't give us a report. You have to give us that final report before we look at. So like right now, we got all these people sending in their reports because they want to apply for more money, kind of thing. Yeah. So there's some reporting that you have to do to make sure before we give you some more money. Okay.
I was just interested in the timeline between the time
So yeah, we put spring 2020 on the website to give us some flexibility, because we are all volunteers. Some of us are really busy. Myself being the least busy, probably. We typically meet about 3 times as the grants committee, once we receive all the applications to score, evaluate them, discuss them. I'd say that takes around 2 months, so.
So sometime in March.
Yeah, March, April is kind of what we aim for.
So last year we did it really good. We all agreed. We came together. We looked at everything and we agreed. And we were like, oh, we don't need to do it anymore. We all agreed. So we got it out quicker, you know.
That does not happen every year.
I know.
Good to know.
Yeah. Which is better than the federal government that does like 6 months to a year to let you know, right? Like,
18 months.
Yeah. Lisa.
If you are able to get the funding, do you have the following year, are you kind of like on the top of the ladder to get funded again because the project was so successful and you loved it and you're like, oh yeah, they're in? Or do you have to, you have to just go through the rigmarole of wondering if you're gonna get the funding again? Or
So it helps when you have a successful program. I wouldn't say because you're in, right? I would say because we know you have a successful program and you've shown us the impact. But there are programs that have come to us multiple years and we say, okay, well, how many times are we gonna fund? Like, maybe they should start looking somewhere else, or maybe they've grown and we've supported them for as much, and now we need to let them like move on, right? So we've had all those various conversations on the grant committee. So I would say no, nobody's a shoo-in.
Yeah, and I think in the past our rule has been we don't fund the same organization 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
So our budget just isn't big enough to kind of be sustaining supporters of one program for multiple years, because we kind of want to be able to see new projects, new organizations even, and then hopefully help them find funding sources that have a larger endowment.
Or I could add to that, for the organizations that we have funded frequently, it's with a different project each time.
Yes.
It's not the same project.
Yes.
That's kind of key for us. is
Yes.
that we-
It's a different piece.
We will give seed money to help you get up and running, but, you know, once you've demonstrated a certain capacity and, you know, take that and run with it. You know.
So say right now, in very beginning stage, and I just applied for a micro loan and get approved.
Micro grant.
I mean, micro grant, I'm sorry.
Loan you have to pay back.
You don't wanna get
Yeah.
Say I apply for the micro grant and I get approved, and then I'm able to kind of get ready to go to apply for a larger grant.
Yes, that makes
And
us
then
happy.
would that still count in the 3 years
Oh,
of being?
no,
or would that be
no,
only with the
no.
small?
Yeah,
large?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I have a question about the area issues and how to figure out, I have a project and there's like 3 different ones that it could go under and I don't know. Who on the board is the person to talk to help me figure that out? Yeah?
Okay, yeah.
Actually, when you send us an email, we all get the email kind of thing. And sometimes I like jump, oh, I can answer that, you know? So some of us just answer it, but he's the head of the grant committee, so Rothen would be and then maybe he can't answer you and he'll come to us. He'll say, hey, I got a question, and then we like flesh it out with him, so.
Yeah, and I would not get too hung up on that if you know that it fits into multiple areas and if there's one that like
That's a
it
good thing.
definitely fits into, yeah, click that and we'll see, like,
You're not gonna be like, oh, they picked the wrong one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, throw it out now. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's just in the beginning, everybody was checking off all of the
Yeah.
issue areas, and we, you know, for our metrics, we need to know what, you know, have
Most
just one.
closely aligned.
Yeah,
with,
most
yeah.
closely.
Yeah, because we recognize that it could be a couple of things that sort of, you know.
Yeah, and some of it's like the community advocacy that leads to including this outcome, and that
Right.
outcome is like, is it including mean only including, or is it can be other things as well, and there's like environmental justice and this other one, but it's a different means to get there,
Mhm.
so.
Lisa.
it's starting up an organization, right?
Yeah.
Capacity building.
Yeah.
I wish I knew that. It's costly.
Yeah.
It
It
is.
is.
Mhm. Yeah. Capacity building. Anybody else? So we would like to respect your time. And so, I saw him a few minutes ago, my nephew. I have some evaluation surveys. Sean, can you get those evaluation surveys in the back? Yeah, okay. That you guys, all right, already got passed out. Anybody did not get a survey yet? Okay, we'd like for you to, and let me just say, there's front and back, they're two-sided, I saved paper, but I want a lot of information from you. And hopefully this is something that Rose is gonna help me with, looking at this information that you give me, that we'd love to put on our website and share with the community about whether this was helpful to you guys. And so I wanna first thank you for taking a Saturday morning when the weather is so beautiful to come out and sort of just listen to us about this. And I wanna wish you luck. And we hope that all of you apply for some sort of grant mechanism from the Greater New Haven Green Fund. And I'm going to end, Lynn, would you like to say something as our last word?
Thank you for coming, you know, we've been working on this for so long, it's just, it's good, heartwarming for me to see that it's finally come to fruition, and that we want to be open and responsive to the community, so please be honest in your feedback, and if you have suggestions that you think would be helpful for us, please feel free to think of us. And thank you, Robin, and Marion, and Robert, and Aaron, and Annie, and Robert, and the nephew. I'm sorry, I'm not good at remembering.
Yeah, that's okay.
Anyways, yeah, help yourself to refreshments, please, too. There's coffee, tea, and.
In the back, last question. Yeah?
I had asked Aaron earlier, but I was trying to find out your capacity as an entity, and then something that came up in the discussion or the presentation about what happens behind the scenes. But is there any work that you do to help, let's say initially prior to applying for a grant, to help an entity, an individual, connect with like-minded funders and other nonprofits, and so it's like, oh, without, because some of this in some ways is confidential. At the same time, the realm that said material is in overlaps with other entities, and like, well, you might want to reach out to so-and-so because they.
So let me do that. I'm sorry, but let me do that now. So, of course, we would love for you to apply to the Greater New Haven Green Fund, and one of the reasons why we've spent this time is because we were outreaching to get more organizations, more diverse organizations to apply for our money. When I first came on the board, I was like amazed. I was like, all of the organizations that I know in New Haven, and nobody's going after this money. I was like, did you know? Did you know? And so I started going on my friends' social media, Facebook pages, and things like that. But there is another organization, it's called the New England, it's a regional environmental grassroots fund, and they particularly like grassroots, that after we finish, I'd be happy to show you the website and help you. And that's another source of funding. And they're a little bit different from us, but also there's a lot of synergy too. So if you have a project that you apply for us, I'm pretty sure they'd be willing to take a look at it also.
I think my question is more aligned to this, and because it's kind of relevant. Let's just say Common Ground's got their green jobs program.
Yeah.
Just saw Solar Youth
Yeah.
has a green jobs
Yeah.
program. I designed edible landscapes, and I'm under the impression that there is not the depth of education regarding ecology in some of these, and I'm not trying to.
Yeah, I got you.
But the understanding of ecology in this, and I'm looking to provide my time to teach.
Right.
As well as when on site, now we're taking something that's 2D and theoretical and applying it to a 3D living landscape, where that thought process or that systems thinking can then be applied, and that's also too where I was talking about the young people being paid.
All right.
So like working with entities such as Solar Youth and Common Ground,
ask you, are you asking about money that would allow you to do that?
I'm asking about the whole network money.
He wants us to describe the landscape of organizations that exist in Greater New Haven that may be aligned with his project idea, if he could be put in contact with people at Common Ground, or
Oh,
that we would
okay.
know these people because they've all submitted applications to us and we have a.
So for instance,
Or individuals like Doreen and her projects and things like
yeah,
that.
like for instance, I don't know if we do that yet, but for instance, if you go to our website, I know we used to have a page. It might still be there, you might have to finagle a little bit, but we have a page where it shows you all of the entities that we've ever granted to, or done grants to. And you might go to that page and say, oh, or just like, you know, Doreen or whoever, oh, I might want to reach out to this organization because these 3 organizations look like they might be the type of organizations that might be interested in what you're talking about, right? So that's one way to do it, but I don't know if we've ever, say, done a community coffee hour, where we bring people together around edible landscapes, gardening, or whatever else would be those words that would fit into that, and say, come meet and talk.
Is that the kind of stuff?
That's a micro grant that
That's
you could
exactly
do. That's a grant that you could do. Yes, absolutely. There you go.
Can
I'm
I just
excited
add
now.
one thing? In addition to the New England Grassroots Environmental Fund, which is a great organization, I would recommend you take a look at their website, grassrootsfund.org, and I also have some background with them. I'd be happy to talk with you about that. There's also a group called
Sustainable CT, yes.
which primarily its work is in certifying municipalities as bronze or silver or gold level
entities.
in terms of their commitment to sustainability. That's primarily what they do, but this year they've introduced matching grants up to, I think, $25,000 for environmental projects at the local level.
So let's just say you get a $10,000 grant from us. You can go to Sustainable CT and get a matching $10,000. Where's my, oh, did she leave? Oh, but yeah,
So
depending
take a
on
look
what
at
you're,
that. I think it's sustainablecT.org, but if you Google
Yeah.
Sustainable CT, you'll
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah, so the thing you need to know about that is that they use IOBY.org as the platform for crowdfunding. We're not partnering with Connecticut's sustainability. So if you get a grant from us, you're responsible for fulfilling the grant contract that we give you for that money. And we're independent of the IOBY.org process of crowdfunding. So if you choose to use our grant to go to that platform, you know, we, as a board, we haven't really discussed that, to be honest. I'm a little kind of funny about it. But it's just be aware that the IOBY.org will be your fiduciary as well. So if you want to crowdsource with IOBY.org, they'll be your fiduciary as your grassroots. And they'll help you develop a marketing to do your crowdsourced funding. And they'll match whatever it is that you raise. If you want to use the Green Fund money for one of the donors for that, just understand that we still expect you to fulfill your contractual agreement with the Green Fund for the money that we give you. And that's all I can say about it. It's a little strange. You know, to be honest.
all right.
Thank you.
Well, it's been wonderful seeing and meeting everybody and having everybody sort of ask us questions.
Yeah.